Your host, Kelly Shaw. I'm sitting here with Jay. He has a sighting that happened near the River of No Return Wilderness. It really caught my attention. I always find myself investigating Bigfoot sightings on the outskirts of this River of No Return Wilderness. It's one of the largest wilderness areas in the United States. It's bigger than Yellowstone, and for those of you know a little bit about Yellowstone, Yellowstone is bigger than a lot of eastern states. So just a huge place that's uninhabited by people. So it doesn't surprise me that there's a lot of Bigfoot sightings on the outskirts of this wilderness. I've been on the south side investigating in the ghost town of Deadwood, Challis, Salmon, North Fork Salmon on the east side, and as far north is the Bitterroot Forest in Montana. Seems like a great habitat, and there are a lot of game animals in the area. A lot of people say there isn't enough food out there for Bigfoot, but in reality, if it's going to sustain bighorn sheep, elk, deer, black bear, mountain lion, and even grizzly bear. Unfortunately, a couple was mauled a few years ago in Salmon, Idaho. One of the locals was arguing with me that they didn't have grizzlies in the area, and 3 weeks after I left the area, and I'm just going to bring up some photographs of the area. Can you see those photographs, Jay?
I can, yes.
I just want to show you guys a little bit of the area that we're going to discuss. This is Jay with me. He wants to remain anonymous, so we're not going to use his full name. And I don't blame him. A lot of people don't want to be ridiculed over their sightings. So I went in investigating his sighting, and we're going to have him talk about his sighting in just a second. But I'm just going to give you guys a little bit of a cap of it. He was in there bear hunting, and my game camera's in the area of River of No Return. I believe this is Deadwood on the south side. It's not where Jay had his sighting, but you know, there's giant black bear in the area.
Yep.
And then the culture in the area. This is in Salmon, Idaho, about 30 miles north of Challis, maybe only 20 miles. But as you can see, where there's a lot of Bigfoot sightings, it's in the culture of the area. So, and let me show you just a couple other photos. Yeah, I was right on the edge of River of No Return right there. And while I was there, this was only a few miles from where Jay had his Bigfoot sighting. There was a couple of rattlesnakes that were fighting right there. Snakes don't bother me, but really wigged me out this day if they were being that aggressive with each other. It took me a few miles past this before I wanted to get out of the car. We sat and filmed and took pictures of these snakes fighting right there. And then in the area where we couldn't make it quite all the way back into Jay's area. It takes a four-wheeler, and we were in a vehicle. So we drove back as far as we could and walked around. And we hadn't even been walking 15 minutes, and Jenny and I came face to face with a good-sized black bear. And fortunately, the black bear wasn't interested in us after we come face to face. He turned and ran towards the nearest grove of trees and disappeared. But I thought it was ironic. He's up there bear hunting, and I come face to face with the bear trying to get close to the area where he had his sighting, and there's bighorn sheep. So it's a wonderful area, wonderful habitat. Here's some of the mountains in the area. This is south of Challis. All right, well, we have Jay, and I've posted his Bigfoot sighting on our YouTube, and there's some inaccuracies. He got a hold of me and said that my account reading his report wasn't that accurate, and so I invited him on to a podcast so that he could tell his story without it going through a filter and having someone like me, changing it up in my mind, how that works. So here's Jim, and so you were bear hunting at the time this happened.
It was a spring bear hunt last year. 2016. It's 2 years ago. I had back surgery in November of 2015, and we've been hunting this area for years and years. Matter of fact, my hunting partner has been hunting up there since the early 1980s. So it's an area we know very, very well. The morning that this happened, we have 3 bait sites set up, 3 different tree stands. And because of my back surgery, my 2 buddies were going to get me up into my tree stand and then help me up in there because of my back surgery. And then we were going to meet up at 1 o'clock. When we got to the area, we park our 4-wheelers and we walk in about 3/4 of a mile to a mile to each tree stand. When we got there, one of my hunting partners and I, both of us are former United States Marines. And we noticed that the sounds of the forest they just weren't there. There was no birds, there was no crickets, there was no squirrels moving around. And both of us recognized it. I even made a comment. I said, it feels like we're walking into an ambush. And one of my buddies says, well, maybe it's just Eclipse. There's a bear that we've been seeing on our trail cams for 5 years. We named him Eclipse because he's so big that he stands and eclipses the entire bait barrel and tree in front of it. It looks like you may have a picture of him. He's a big boy. And so you, as an experienced hunter, and anyone who's an experienced hunter, you pay attention to your surroundings. It's called situational awareness. And we just noticed it just felt different. We got to my tree stand, and as I started to climb up in it, I was about 8 feet up off the ground, and the ladder shifted, and I almost went off. I was hanging on, my feet had gone off, and that's when we noticed something had messed with our tree stand. And it's happened before. Bears have gone in there and messed with stuff. So we just re-secured our straps. I climbed up in the stand and was facing towards the barrel. My 2 buddies left, and our plan was to meet up for lunch at about 1 o'clock. Now, part of the things that I didn't put in that report, I had been suffering from sleep apnea where I didn't get a lot of sleep. And so I had dozed off while I was in the stand. And I woke up to this yoop. It was 3 in a row. It was a consistent yoop, yoop, yoop. And I heard it. And I heard it again. And I finally realized, oh man, I've been sleeping. So I thought it was one of my buddies. I looked first down towards the barrel. I looked below the tree stand. I looked to the left down the hill. And then when I shifted my body and looked to the right, that's when I caught the color. It was a deep red, like a cinnamon red color, but it had longer hair than a bear. It was squatting down like a human would squat down. And just as I turned and it was about 60 yards away, it was, like I said, it was squatted down in a ball. And when I turned and looked at it, it turned still in the squatting position. So I pulled my rifle up to look through the scope to see what it was. And it turned still in the squatting position. It turned, it stood up, it grabbed a tree branch with its arm, and it walked off on 2 legs. So I only saw it for a few seconds. But I'll tell you, in that few seconds, I was paralyzed with what was that? It did not fit any reference of any animal that I'd ever seen in 40 years of being in the woods. But this instant fear came over me. And the only time I have ever felt something like that before was when I was in high school and I was out hunting, and I came face to face with a cougar, literally within 30 feet of a cougar who was staring at me. And it was the feeling that I'm assuming prey animals get when a predatory animal is locked on them. It was just an overcoming overwhelming sensation of paralysis. I mean, I couldn't shoot him. I was frozen, having like I don't know how to describe it, an outer body experience. And I look at myself as a pretty tough guy. I've taken down some pretty big animals, but I could not pull the trigger because I could not identify what I had just seen because it looked human to me. It moved like a human moves.
That's pretty shocking. I can understand why you wouldn't want to take a shot on it either. First of all, you're paralyzed trying to decipher what it is that you just saw. And then any responsible hunter just doesn't shoot something they don't identify. As a matter of fact, most hunters are not going to shoot something they don't have a tag for. And, I've heard a lot of people say that. My old boss that had a Bigfoot sighting up on Monte Cristo, he was actually in an elk blind with a spring in front of him, and the Bigfoot come down and got a drink out of the spring, and he had it in his scope, and he thought about taking it out. He says, nobody's gonna believe me that I saw this. I need to harvest it. That's what was going through his head, and he's looking at it through his scope, and it was so human-like. He says he couldn't pull the trigger. Most sane people, 99.9% of people, just don't want to kill another human being or something human-looking. So, and then the state of shock you're in. One of the questions I have is, did you get an estimate on how tall you think it might have been?
Well, it did not appear to me that it was didn't appear like an 8-foot giant.
Right.
The body was more like a human teenager. You know how they're long and lanky, but you can still see muscle definition.
Right.
It was long and lanky. I would love to go back up there and have someone get in that exact same position. I could tell you then more accurately how tall it was, but it was probably 6 or 7 feet tall.
And then it was a cinnamon color?
Yeah, it was a deep red, like more red than any bear I'd ever seen.
Yeah, and that's a great form of camouflage. I've noticed is a deep reddish color is great camouflage. It seems most Bigfoot sightings, when people talk about the color is a great type of camouflage for the forest. The blacks, the browns, dark browns, even some of the blondes. I've ran into grizzly bears and black bears that have all these multitude of colors, and just like the bear, the Bigfoot carries some of the same colors.
I'll tell you that when this happened, I replayed that in my mind for months before I decided to send in any report. I couldn't sleep because to this day, I still don't know what I saw. I'm hesitant to call it a Bigfoot because I'm one of those guys who believes if they were out there, we'd find a body, but I can only tell you what it was not. In my mind, I thought, okay, maybe it's a grizzly bear, but a grizzly bear could not turn in a squatting position, stand up, grab a branch with a hand, not a paw. I watched his hand close on this branch to get his balance and walk off on 2 legs. It was darker, reddish brown, like a grizzly bear would be, but it didn't. I've seen grizzly bears before. I've killed a bunch of black bears. I know exactly what their body and their shoulders and their neck and everything looks like. This did not have protruding ears. It had a very distinct shoulder set with a rotator cuff type shoulder with broad back. I could see the muscles in his glutes flexing. I could see the thigh muscles flexing. And I could see the feet. They were not pads. Wasn't a bear. I know for a fact it was not a bear. It wasn't an elk. I can't tell you what it was. I can only tell you what it was not. But I couldn't get a good night's sleep for months and months and months. And I didn't tell anybody. To this day, my hunting partners don't know. My son was with me. He doesn't know. Because all of us are the type that would say, the baloney, this is BS. You didn't see that. That's another reason why I don't want to get my name out there. I don't want people calling me. It's one of those situations where I know what I saw, and it looked, walked, moved with fluid movement, not herky-jerky movement like a bear. I've seen bears stand up. I've seen them when I've been in ground blind stand up and try to get a good smell and move on their back legs, and they move with a herky-jerky waddling. This thing moved with efficiency, and it moved with fluid movement on two legs. The moment I turned to face it, it could see me turning, and it just pivoted, stood up, walked out. But that's not the whole part of the story. I was there frozen in a state of panic. And I looked at my watch. I thought, man, 2 hours. I got to sit here for 2 hours before my buck. Because I heard there was no way in hell I was getting down out of that tree stand with whatever that thing was around.
And how many meters do you estimate it was when you observed it?
Oh, it was parallel to the bait barrel, which was the bait barrel was set at 60 yards. This thing was no more than 65 yards away.
Yeah, that's really close.
That is really close.
Yeah, that's something that you can hit with the bow. That's pretty damn close to me.
Yeah. And I sat there, and about within 20 minutes, I started hearing this clicking sound directly behind me. And at first, I thought it was like an elk calf or a deer fawn clicking to find its mom. And it was the same type of pattern. It was a click, click, click. And then about the third time I heard it, I realized it sounded like two rocks clicking together. And every few minutes, this thing moved around me off just into the tree line within 100 yards where I couldn't see anything moving. But I would hear it click, 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 just tapping rocks together. And this thing moved around me for about 30 minutes.
That's amazing.
And I'll tell you what, I was as nervous as a cat having kittens, man.
All right, I'm really interested in, what shape was its head, and did it have a visible neck?
It did not appear to have a visible neck. The head was sitting on the shoulders. The head was like a conical shaped head. From the side, because I saw it better from the side, and then I stood up and saw the back. With the back, the head flowed right into the shoulders and the long hair. Wide shoulders. Big shoulder.
And you got to look at the face at all?
No, I didn't see the face. I just saw it from the side. When it made its turn, when I first looked down there and I got the color pattern, the color stood and jumped out at me. When I first looked at it, it may have been facing me, but my eyes didn't register right away what the hell I was looking at. So when I pulled my scope up, by the time I pulled my scope up, I could see, it would be its right shoulder and back. But its face must have been dark because it was squatting down facing me. And when I first looked that way, I couldn't make out facial features. So I'm assuming the face had to have been dark, but I couldn't tell you because I didn't see the face clearly.
So you were able to get a scope on it and get a better look at it through your scope?
Yeah. And that's when I saw the back of it, the shoulders and the legs and the muscle flex. I mean, you could see the gluteus muscles and the thigh muscles as it was stepping off.
Yeah, that's amazing. You're up there hunting bears. You know exactly the profile, the structure of a bear, and you know instantly and throughout the entire encounter, you were not looking at a bear. You were looking at something that was more human than anything. Yeah.
It was more human than anything. If anyone asked me, if someone asked me what and no one has, you're the only person that I've talked to about this. If someone asks me what I think a Sasquatch is, it has to be a race of human. It's not an ape. might have hair like an ape,
Right.
but it's got to be a race of human.
Man, that just gives me chills. My grandfather had 3 Bigfoot walk up within about 30 yards of him and observe him. And some of the descriptions that you've given me are the same types that he gave me, and the paralysis and just the shock that he was in. And my grandfather had his sighting in the 30s, and there wasn't the phrase Bigfoot back then. He didn't know what he had saw, but he thought it may have been a primitive form of giant hairy people. They observed him like people, acted like people, and the smallest one, which was as tall as he was about 6'3". He was trapped fishing, and his only way to get away from them was jump in the lake and start swimming. They were blocking his escape, and so once he got his fear under control, he started fishing again. He's like, maybe I just need to keep doing what I was doing. They're just standing there watching me. And then he was like, well, maybe they're here for my fish, because he's caught a few. He chucked one back, and the smallest of the 3 come up, grabbed the fish, took it back to the rest. So he started throwing the rest of his fish back. And after they retrieved a few, they left. And then that's when he went and found his camping buddies, and they left the area. This was in Washington. They left the area never to return. They did an annual backpacking trip to this area near Mount St. Helens every year, and they changed the location after that. And it wasn't until the Patterson-Gimlin footage come out like 37 years later that he could tell people, that's what I saw 3 of them walk up on me, and he described them as a primitive form of hairy humanoids.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's really exciting. Yeah, your sighting just gives me the chills. And I'm sorry I interrupted you, but you said that the clicking sound that sounded like rocks clicking around you lasted for about 30 minutes, and it made its way around behind you.
It started up to my right, up the hill, and then went behind me, and then around until it was in front of me more than 100 yards, because it was back in the tree line. I had recorded it on another phone, and with iPhones, I didn't back it up, and I ended up losing the damn thing. And so I no longer have it, but I wish I still had it there so people could hear it. But there's no animal that I'm aware of in the woods that can bang things together. Maybe a monkey, but
so
I don't have.
With the shock of all this happening, how long did it take you to realize? How long did it take you to realize that you could utilize your phone to start recording what was going on?
About the 4th set of clicks, I'm like, no one's going to believe this. I got to record it.
Yeah, a lot of people are, complain that when someone has a Bigfoot sighting, everybody has a phone. Why didn't they take a photo or take a video of the phone? And usually the sightings are really fast, and you're in shock. And by the time you start getting your wits about you to do something about it, it's over. And I don't think a lot of people realize that. I've spent about the last 10 years seriously hunting for Bigfoot, and the icing on the cake, there's a lot of disappointment, 99.99% disappointment trying to find Bigfoot, but the icing on the cake is the other wildlife that I get to see along the way. And I've seen some pretty rare animals. I got an 11-second sighting of a wolverine. That's a really rare sighting in the lower 48. And I picked up a camera, turned it on, tried getting the camera on it. I couldn't. It got on the other side of the car because it crossed the dirt road in front of us like it owned the place. And I threw the camera to Jenny. It was on, and she tried getting it, and it got away. And then, we're like, we're never going to flip and get a Bigfoot if, we got a full 11-second sighting of a wolverine and we can't even get a picture or a video of it. I mean, unless you already got that camera going, it's really hard. But that's
Well,
what we do.
after that, I went and bought GoPros so that I can wear them no matter where I'm going.
Right. And I do that too. I have a chest GoPro, but
Yeah, but going up there as many times as I did, and then my hunting partner, who's been hunting up there since 1983, I sat down with him after we were on another hunt. We were actually snow goose hunting in Arkansas, and we were sitting in the lodge, he and I asked him, "You ever seen anything weird up there on that mountain?" He said, "What do you mean weird?" I said, "I don't know, something you couldn't identify." He said, "Like Bigfoot?" I said, "I'm not saying Bigfoot, but you ever had anything come into your field of view that you couldn't identify?" And all he said was he never had anything come into field of view. He said that on one particular hunt, he was by himself, and it was in the exact same tree stand that I was in. He said he had a feeling that someone was watching him, and it's just like the hair stood up on the back of his neck. He said it was like this intense. He couldn't figure out where it was. He was looking all around. No bears were coming in after he had seen multiple bears on the trail cams. He knew they were coming into the bait. And he said that he just had this intense feeling that somebody was watching him. And he said after about 20 minutes, middle of the day, he just climbed down and hiked back to his four-wheeler. And you saw where we were at. There's no way you're going to get to that place in a truck.
Right.
You got to go up to get to the Jeep trail, and then you better take four-wheelers the rest of the way. And then you still got to hike about a mile in. It is it's pretty remote. I mean, you're 27 miles from a good road. That's just that road that was all bumpy that you were on. And then you're 30 plus miles from a paved road.
Yeah, that was a rough road too, man. That was rough getting back where I made it to.
Yeah, not very many people hunt back there. It's too tough to get to. We've seen, of all the years we went up there and putting our trail cams up there, one time we've seen another hunter, and it was a guy with some dogs came on our trail cams.
Now, a lot of people will say that the Bigfoot avoid the trail cameras, and I believe they do too. Not because they know, oh, someone's going to get a picture or a video of me. I'm sure they have no clue what a picture or a video is, but they don't trust things that don't belong in their environment. It's why they're rarely saw. In my opinion, a Bigfoot does not want to be seen, just like a mountain lion. A mountain lion does not want to be seen by predators, prey, or even their peers, other mountain lion. So they will do what they can to stay unseen, and I believe the Bigfoot's the same way. And they may detect the infrared that's coming off the game camera. They may be able to smell the batteries, smell the plastic, and so they avoid them. But I still use them in my search for Bigfoot because everything makes a mistake. And on top of that, I believe if I keep game cameras in certain places permanently, maybe the Bigfoot will become desensitized to them and start to not see them as a threat and get lucky. But I'm not going to throw out the tool. It will always be a part of one of my tools. And your area, you guys have gotten bear on your game cameras back in there, and I know there's Bigfoot back there because you're not the only one that has saw them back in there on the edge of the river in no return wilderness. There are dozens and dozens of sighting reports that come out of that area. I get a sighting report almost once a year in that general area. So
I think the only way that someone is going to prove the existence of whatever this thing is, someone's going to have to spend a lot of time up there going in and checking daily. But I'll tell you, when this happened to me, like I said, I couldn't sleep for weeks, months. And after about, I think it was in September. It was in September, I think. That it happened early June 6th, I think is when it happened. Finally, in September, after replaying this thing 1,000 times in my head and trying to identify what I saw, so I didn't misidentify anything, I finally sent a report to another organization, and it took them, I think, 6 months before they even emailed me back. But the funny thing was, is I sent in that report to you, and it was, I don't know, within days, or within a couple of weeks, you had gone up there.
Yeah, I believe I got that report from you, and it was probably a month later I was up there. I actually had an expedition planned, and I canceled my reservations and everything, and switched it over to this because I believe it had been a year since, or less, since your sighting. And to me, that's a fresh sighting in the world of Bigfoot. They're so rare that you just get to them as soon as you can, and and I've had some good luck with some really old sightings. One of my best places to find footprints, hear vocalizations, is a place that's a 40-year-old sighting. People give me a hard time. It's like, that sighting happened 12 years ago. What are you doing there? Well, there was a reason for the Bigfoot to be there that day. Maybe they come back, maybe they stay in the area. Well, this place that I find footprints and stuff all the time, last fall, a bow hunter on the road a couple of miles from where I do a lot of hiking, he had a Bigfoot cross the road from him on an overcast day, right in the middle of the day. So, the things I'm finding, the Bigfoot still there. So you saying that you getting a hold of me, and I'm finding out that your sightings about a year ago, I'm still going to go up there and check it out. There's a reason for the Bigfoot to have been there then. There's no reason why it wouldn't be there today, or pass through the area from time to time.
Yeah. After I sent in the report, now I'm starting to pay attention to what other hunters are saying. And someone else on a different reporting, I don't know what you guys call this organization, someone else had a sighting about 7 miles from where my sighting was, that you probably went right by. And it's the same thing. It was a group of hunters, and one of them had gone up high on a ridge to glass and saw what he thought was one of his hunting party on the other ridge. And that report was about 7 miles from my report, and it was, I think, the year before.
Right. I know the sighting you're talking about. I've spoke to that guy on Facebook several times, and he saw your sighting report investigation, and he got a hold of me, and he's like, I had a sighting near there, and told me a little bit about it, and people are seeing them there, and right there on the edge of the river or no return wilderness. People can't build in there. There's not very many roads at all. If a creature wants to stay unmolested by mankind, that's a great place for it to be. And obviously, with the game in the area, there's plenty to eat. I have a hypothesis that Bigfoot follows the elk herds. And I don't know if it's because it eats the elk or it eats what the elk's eating, but it's probably both. Probably eats what the elks are eating, and when it gets an opportunity, it takes an elk. There's a biologist in Colorado that put together sighting reports and elk populations, and at the same time of the year that people are seeing Bigfoot in Colorado, the Bigfoot are also, the elk are also at the same elevations where people are given these sighting reports. And I think he's on to something there. I'm sure they eat more than that. I'm sure they eat the deer, the bighorn sheep when they can get a hold of them. I believe they're opportunists, just like a bear, an omnivore. So it's a great place.
Like I said, now that I'm paying more attention to things, again, I don't want to go out and say it was a Bigfoot, but I cannot identify what it was. But thinking about this, that time of year when the does are having their babies and the elk are calving, it's easy for a predator to catch an elk calf that can't hardly move. They stay hidden in the grass and they stay hidden back in the forest. If they are following the elk herds, they would probably have their greatest luck in capturing a calf at the time of the year that I was up there when the calves were brand new.
Right.
They're coming out of the tree lines, they're coming out of the snow, they're coming down to where the good grass is. And you were close to where I was at. You were still a few miles from where I was actually at. It was a pretty thick wooded area. But, there's a lot of berries and stuff up there. A lot of nutritional stuff for elk and deer and the bear. If they are following the elk, it's got to be during the calving season.
And I would like to add to that a Bigfoot sighting that I had an opportunity to get into the day after it happened, and then a couple of days later with the witness. The witness got a hold of a guy that knows me and also knows Todd Strong, and Todd Strong is the BFRO investigator for the Utah area. And he got a hold of me the day after the guy had his sighting, and I didn't know the exact spot. And he's like, the guy can't take us back up there for a couple of more days because of his schedule, but he's going to take us to the spot. I shot right up there and started looking around, although I didn't know the exact spot. I just knew the general area. And then when we were able to hook up with that guy, Todd Strong also come along, and we did our investigation up there. But what happened is he was hiking with his girlfriend, and he heard a screaming doe, a doe in distress. Mm-hmm. And him and his girlfriend come upon the doe about 10 minutes later, and it was still screaming. Well, it's laying there dying, and it's trying to give birth to a stillborn. And the guy's name's Curtis. You guys can go look up Curtis's Bigfoot sighting on my YouTube. We've actually interviewed him on there at the location. Well, he's trying to pull the fawn out, and it's sloughing off. It's been dead for quite a while, and finally he gave up trying to pull it out, and he went up to the head of the doe and started petting her and trying to calm her and just give her some support, some emotional support. And she finally expired while he's petting her. And after she expires, he notices up on the hill about 70 yards away, Bigfoot standing there staring at him. And then that's when he, looked up at it, and both of him and his girlfriend noticed it at that time too. And they started observing it. Once it noticed them seeing it, it made its way up over the ridge. Now, if this creature wasn't interested in an easy meal, why would it come in? Was it going to come in and do the same thing Curtis did, try to save the doe's life? No, I don't think so. I think that Bigfoot was there for an easy meal. Anyway, we do the reenactment and stuff there with Curtis trying to stand where the Bigfoot was to get a size comparison and stuff. And me and a couple of my team members, we get up there and we start finding the footprints of this thing. 17 inches long by about 7 inches wide, and then at the widest point. And then there's a few places where it's steep, where you can see it put its hand down on the ground. So now all of a sudden we have physical evidence back up, and we're finding all these footprints where he says he saw it, where it went up over the hill. So and then of course the doe's right down there dead where he said it was, with the stillborn and everything. So he had a lot of physical evidence that we found to back up his claim, and that was only 3 days after it happened. So when you're saying that they're probably following the elk herds during the calving season for an easy meal, they don't even have to take the life of the animal. If the placenta isn't eaten by the mother and just left behind, that's an easy meal. And then of course there's going to be a percentage of them that are going to give birth to stillborns, very easy. And then the calves are an easy at the mill. So yeah, I really do believe that a Bigfoot will take meat if it can, and I really have to agree with you. It's probably following the elk herds during that same time of year for that reason.
Mm-hmm. And after this happened to me, and I started paying a lot more attention and reading reports and not really directly asking people, but talking to friends that are hunters and just asking if they had any weird things happen that they couldn't explain. Most of the people that are in my circles, they don't even want to, if they have seen anything, they're not telling me. You know, they don't believe. I didn't believe in it. I will tell you, I just don't have an answer for what it was.
Right.
Because it moved like a human. You know, and someone was asking on one of the reports. They were asking someone else, but I was thinking about the answer. If someone asked me what I thought it was, or do you think it was someone in a monkey suit? You know, it crossed my mind, could someone have hoaxed me? Except I'm 27 miles from a good road. I'm out in the woods with a bunch of other rednecks with rifles during hunting season. It would not be smart to try to hoax somebody who's armed in a tree stand, who's ready to kill something. So, you know, like I said, it was not a bear. It was not an elk. And I'll ask you the question, you know, what do you think 27 miles from a road with a bunch of hunters with rifles?
Well, I'm not embarrassed to say it. I think you had a Bigfoot sighting. You don't want to put that label on it because you just don't want to accept that's what it is. And also your entire life, you know, you haven't been able to go to a zoo or whatever, and someone say that's a Bigfoot. You don't know what you saw, but it wasn't any of the animals in the area. It was human-like, covered in hair, and what, a dark cinnamon type, brown type hair.
Yep. And the feeling, that overwhelming feeling of fear, frozen panic. I mean, I've looked at like I said, the only other time that ever happened to me was when I was standing eyeball to eyeball with a cougar who wanted to eat me. And had my friend Kevin not come running up, that cougar probably would have pounced on me. But it was an internal physiological thing in my body where the hair was standing on the back of my neck.
Right.
And it was an overwhelming feeling. It was unlike anything that I'd ever felt on any previous hunting trip. It did not fit any reference I had of any animal that I've ever seen in the wild. I've been blessed to see a lot of animals in the woods. I've seen in that same area, I've seen wolves. I've never seen a wolverine, but I've seen wolves. And, you know, I've had wolves walk right past my tree stand not probably within 100 yards where I could see them through the trees. I knew they were there, but not close enough to see their whole body at the same time. I've seen a ton of elk and deer and bear. I've seen cougar up there on our trail cams, but this did not fit any reference that I had of any animal other than a human. It's got to be a subspecies of human. It has to be.
I would like to go back to the beginning of your sighting. You heard 3 whoops, and then it come walking out to where you could see it after you heard the 3 whoops.
No, I had dozed off. I'd fallen asleep,
mm-hmm.
and I woke up to this yoop, like a Y, yoop, not like a whoop, but like I said, yoop. And it was in a pattern of 3. Yoop, 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 and then there was a pause, like it was waiting for a response. By the time when I caught a glimpse of it, it wasn't moving, it was squatted down. Just like when I'm glassing an area, I don't want my body to be seen. I'm squatting down, I'm using the terrain, trees or rocks or bushes, and I'm glassing the area.
Master of camouflage.
Yeah, I'm trying to pattern the whatever I'm hunting, the elk or the deer, to get a good idea where they're at, what they're doing, the patterning the bear. There's a reason we go up and check those trail cams every day. We know what time the bears are coming in and who's coming in and who's controlling the bait site. So a good hunter will pattern his prey. And in my mind, this thing was trying to communicate with something, either another, whatever it is, or me trying to see if I was going to respond to it.
Right. Might have mistaken you for another Bigfoot and was trying to say, "Hey, who are you?"
Yeah.
But I mean, there's a whole plethora of reasons it could have done that. Of course, it could have been warning other Bigfoot that there was a hunter in the area.
If I had to guess, this thing was young. Like I said, teenager. That's what the body looked like. My son at the time was 16, 17, and he's tall. He's 6'3". And he has that lanky build. If he were to get into a gym and really bulk up, he could be an easy 240, 250 pounds. He's probably 180, 190 pounds. But that long, lanky, that's what appeared when it stood up and moved away. But it was squatted down in a small, it was probably 3 or 4 feet tall, but squatted down, knees bent, rump on the ground.
Was that side profile to you as when it was squatted down?
Yeah, it turned in the squatting position. So it was squatted down and it turned. That's when I saw the shoulder, the side of it. When I first saw that it was there, when the color, because the color stood out. The color stood out like I said, like a cinnamon color bear.
Right.
So that's what I saw first. And it was still squatting down. So the face must have been black because I did not see a distinguished, I know it was not a light colored face. Because when I pulled my rifle up, I could see it turned to the left, so I could see its right shoulder, the right side of its head, but I could not make it out an ear, and I could see across the back, the hips. I mean, it stood straight up, grabbed the branch for balance, because it was on the side of a hill. It was right next to a tree. And when it turned, it reached up, it grabbed the tree limb with a hand,
right,
and then pulled itself up the rest of the way and walked up the hill.
That's amazing.
It would have been easier for a bear to walk on 4 legs to get up the hill. That's how steep the side of it was. This thing walked on 2 legs and walked off.
Yeah, a bear will usually stand up on hind legs to get a better look at something, and after it gets the look that it wants, it's right back down on all fours. In my experience, whenever I've saw black bear or grizzlies, they rarely go up on 2, and it's usually just a really quick glance, get to see what they see, then they're gone on 4. They don't traditionally just travel on 2 legs. So this Bigfoot is in a squatting position, already pretty much down on all 4s, and then it sounds like it's more comfortable walking on 2 legs. It stands up, and that's how it retreats. So it moved up the hillside, and did it go over a ridge, or did it go into a tree line?
It went right back into the trees. Within just a second or two, because the tree cover was pretty thick in that area. So within a few seconds, it was back into the trees, and I couldn't tell you.
How many steps do you think it took from the time it stood up and started heading up into cover?
Probably 3 steps, and then it was out of view.
And so your sighting lasted how many seconds, you estimate?
5 seconds.
5 seconds, but that was still enough time for you to get your scope up on it. I would have,
because I saw my rifle was on, so I have a crossbar on my tree stand.
Right.
My rifle was sitting on the crossbar, facing towards the bait barrel, and I had been leaning back when this pattern. I heard it 3 times before I actually moved. I heard that yoop, 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 pause, and it's probably a 15-second pause, yoop, yoop, yoop. And the 3rd time is when I leaned forward and I started to look, where was this coming from? I looked at the bait barrel, looked down by the tree, and then when I looked to my right and I saw the color, the moment I saw the color, it started to, when I caught a glimpse of it, it immediately moved. The moment I looked towards it, because my whole body had to shift, it was up and to the right from my tree stand. So I had to shift my whole body to look in that direction. And it, like I said, I saw the color, and then it immediately started to pivot. I drew my rifle up on it. By the time I got my rifle up, I could see the shoulders, the back, the glutes, the thighs. This thing had when it grabbed the tree, it reached up with its right hand, grabbed the tree, and you could see forearms like Popeye. I mean, it was big. So even though it wasn't, and again, unless I put someone in that position where I could show the exact tree and where he grabbed, I can't give you a definitive size, but it didn't appear to be like a huge giant, but it, 6 or 7 feet tall, probably within a man's size.
And so you saw its hand, so for sure that it wasn't some kind of a paw. You saw a hand.
Yep, I could see the back of his hand. It was a freaking hand. It was not a claw. It was not a paw. It was a hand that reached up and grabbed that tree limb, pulled itself up, got balanced, let go of it, and walked away.
Damn, it's amazing. Yeah, you're lucky. I just haven't had a clear open sighting yet. I don't know. Maybe I never will. I mean, I've had glimpses that I would really love to have a good sighting like that. I mean, I'm jealous.
It's a double-edged sword because I don't know what it is, and I couldn't get a good night's sleep for probably several months. I had to finally tell somebody because none of my friends would have believed me. None of my friends would have talked about it. The reason I'm wearing sunglasses and this hat, I mean, my friends are going to recognize me when they watch this, but I'm probably going to get some ridicule, but at least John Q. Public's not going to know who I am because I don't want to answer a bunch of questions. I don't want people showing up at my door. Hey, take me to where this is. I don't want any of that crap. I mean, I don't mind. If you want to go up there again, I'll take you up there and we can sit up there for days on end. And I've thought about this for the last year and a half. It's been now 18 months since the sighting that I had. How many times I've been up there and how many times my son and my hunting partners have sat in those tree stands and not seen anything. I was trying to determine what this thing would be. It has number one, in my mind, it has to be human, and it's got to be traveling through the area because my hunting partner hunts fall and spring in that area. He hunts elk in that area during the elk season. He's taken multiple bulls. He helps other people, he gets them into the area and shows them where the good bulls are. And nobody within my hunting group, which are dozens of people, I can't even imagine that they would have seen anything because we probably would have talked about it at some point. Because I asked individually, I've never asked when I'm in the group because I don't want to be ridiculed, but if we're out and we're having, dinner or something, I might ask him, you ever seen anything weird? And the only time was one of them, the one that's hunted there the most, said that one time he felt the intensity of someone watching him and just got out of there. He didn't know what it was. He couldn't explain it. And when you're a hunter and you know what it takes to put meat in the freezer, you know the feeling that you get as a predator when you're putting an elk in your sights or a deer in your sights or a bear in your sights. That feeling that you are the most dominant thing in the woods. But when you have an experience like this, you realize you're not the most dominant thing in the woods. And it becomes scary. You're frozen with fear. So it's a double-edged sword. People might say, God, I want to see it. I want to see it. I want to see it. When you have the experience that I had, you won't sleep. You'll be in panic mode. You'll feel weak. You know that you are not the top of the food chain when you're out there. And to be frank with you, I have not been out there since. I have been invited to go out multiple times. And I'm just like, I can't do it right now. At some point I will, but I'm not going out there sitting by myself again.
My best experience or most unnerving experience is in one of my main spots, my favorite spot to go to, we find footprints a lot here, a lot of vocalizations. There was just a sighting there last year, I was telling you. But I think it was 2011 or 2012, Brody and I found a trackway of 19-inch footprints. You know, I know people have cast larger footprints than that, but that's the largest footprint that I have ever personally saw. And we casted one of them that day, just giant, 19 inches long, 8 inches wide. And I was just in complete shock that something like that with a foot size that big, I mean, just how massive this creature would have to be is living out there. And I was just in awe and shock the rest of the day. And then that night I woke up with a nightmare. It was just hard for me to accept that something like that is out there. I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around it. I know that's what I do for a part-time job is hunt for Bigfoot, but because I have not saw it open and clearly enough to make that claim. You know, I've heard vocalization, saw the footprints. I think I've even smelled the creature. I've had it parallel me, even bluff charge me at the tree line, you know, come up just to where it could break out into the open to where I could see it and it wouldn't. And so I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around it. But what keeps me going is I have a lot of close family members, a lot of close friends throughout my life that have saw it. Some have saw it very close. My partner in this, Derek Wright, he sometimes hosts these with me. He had a sighting that lasted a couple of minutes. It came within a few feet of him. He could have reached out and touched it. And he had that fear that you were talking about, that paralysis fear. He couldn't even move and he didn't even want to breathe. He was afraid if it hurt him breathing, it might do something about it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that was me. I didn't want to breathe. I was sitting there knowing I got to wait 2 hours. And I'll tell you, I mean, it was a pucker factor of 10, Jack. I was sitting there and it was, man, I did not want to move. I didn't want to blink. I didn't want to breathe. I didn't want to attract this thing in case he didn't see me. I was just sitting there. I remember thinking to myself, shit, man, I got to wait 2 hours.
Now, the rock clacking that you heard going on around behind you, did you hear whatever was making the rock clacking? Did you hear it moving around, like moving through the woods?
I didn't. No, I didn't. It was, and see, that time of year, it's there's the brand new leaves are just getting on the trees, so there's not a lot of dead leaves where you would hear the crackling and the breaking of sticks. It had to have been more than 100 yards away because I couldn't see anything. I would
the
hear
rock
it.
clacking's moving, like it was moving. You heard them.
So what would happen is, let's say we're on a clock, right? And my tree stand is the center hands of the clock. Mm-hmm. I first heard it probably 50 yards from where I originally seen this animal. It was up more to my right, but behind me. So let's say it was if I'm the center hands on the clock, this thing would have been about the 4 o'clock position on the clock.
Okay.
That's when I heard it.
And then what position was it that you saw the creature disappear before you heard?
About 2 o'clock. 2 to 3 o'clock, because I had to look up to my right. It was up a hill. The way my tree stand is, the hill slopes down, and I'm taking across the hill shot. So I'm not facing down the hill. I'm going across this way.
Right.
Okay. I don't know if you can see my hands on that, but the bait barrel, where my tree stand is, I'm shooting with the side of the hill to my right. I'm parallel shooting to the side of this hill. And the wind was moving down the hill. So my barrel was not downhill from me. It was across the hill from me. So my scent was going down the hill. The barrel scent was going down the hill. We set that up because there was a trail there that the bears were coming up. And if we had put that tree stand in any other position, they would have winded us. The only other position where they wouldn't have winded this has been on the other side of the barrel, but there was too much tree, way too much tree over there. There was no good line of sight.
Okay.
And so go ahead.
Okay, so he moves away at the 2 o'clock position, and then
That's where I originally saw him.
That
Okay. That's where I originally saw him. So I was looking up and to my right, and probably within 20 minutes is when I heard the first set of 3 clicks. And again, when I first heard it, I thought it was an elk calf, and it would have been about the 4 o'clock position, so it would have been just behind me to my right.
Okay, so the one that the Bigfoot-like creature that you saw disappear, do you think it could have been making the rock clacks, or it was some other animal, or possibly another Bigfoot, or do you think it could have made its way unseen around to where the rock clacks started?
Oh, it could have easily made its way unseen around me.
Okay.
Very easily. Because I can't even see when my partners are coming up to get me, I can't even see them coming through that same woods until they're about 50 feet away. That's how heavy the thickness of the forest is right there.
Right. Okay.
So if my tree stand is in the center of the clock, right, across from the 9 o'clock position and 3 o'clock position, and my tree stand is right there, the first click was at 4 o'clock, and then 2 minutes later, it would have been at about 6 o'clock, and that's when I realized, okay, what the hell was that? And then about 2 or 3 minutes later, again, it was at 7 o'clock, and it clicked, and that's when I thought, okay, wait a minute, those are rocks. I can hear them clearly now, because when it got there to that position, I realized, okay, this is high pitch. This is not an elk calf clicking and chattering. And then when it got to the 9 o'clock position, and I'm scanning the tree line, and I'm trying to figure out where is this thing going to pop up next. When it got to the 9 o'clock position, I got my phone out, and I started recording, waiting for it. And you'll hear about if there was a way to recover off that old phone, which there might be a tech guy that could do it. You would hear 2 or 3 minutes of silence, and then you hear the click, click, click. And I'm sorry, again, I was the first couple times, I was like, is that a bird? Is that an elk calf? The hell is that? And then it did it about the 11 o'clock position, and then right at the 12 o'clock position, directly in front of me, but into the trees behind the bait barrel.
Okay.
And then it was just like, oh shit, I kept looking at my watch, man. I finally took my watch out, put it in my pocket, because I was looking at my watch like every 2 minutes. I was thinking, holy shit, man, I got to get out.
When the rock clacks ended, did you hear anything, any other vocalizations or anything else unusual?
The only thing that happened is after the last set of rock clicks, within 10 minutes, a squirrel had come down and came into the bait barrel where I didn't, I saw some little chipmunks before that, but the squirrel came from behind the bait barrel and came in to the bait barrel.
I've experienced rock clacks one time, 2012 in the Bloody Bucket of Idaho. I camp in Bloody Bucket of Idaho a couple of times a year because there's a lot of Bigfoot sightings there, and as a matter of fact, a lot of hunters claim that they when they have a Bigfoot sighting, it's 3 of them that are together like a family unit. One at the couple of years in a row, they were claiming to see an 8-foot one, a 7-foot one, and one that was right around 6 feet tall. So I'm like, that's the place to go. And I started going. Well, the second time I was camping there, just as the sun was going down, all of a sudden these vocalizations started up. And I felt like I was watching a rerun of Finding Bigfoot, where at the end, they start doing those vocalizations back and forth to each other. And I'm sitting there thinking, maybe there's someone else up here camping and they're doing Bigfoot vocalizations. So, after it all ended and stuff, and I'm asking my girlfriend, what the hell? We jump in the vehicle and start heading up and down the canyon of the Bloody Bucket. And it got kind of eerie because I was expecting to find campers, and then I was going to blame those vocalizations on them. And pretty soon it was apparent after we drove the entire canyon before going back to camp that we were the only ones there that night. We were camping in the middle of the week. It had just got done raining for several days, and so I think it drove people away. And kept people away. So I was thinking, God, we're going to have a crazy night when we got back to camp after hearing those vocalizations. Well, we didn't hear a damn thing. It was a really nice night. And the next morning, about an hour or so before the sun come up, on the hillside above our camp, a coyote started yipping and then howling. And the coyote sent to me just sounded happy to be alive or whatever. And anyway, after he did that a few times, some rock clacks started up, and the coyote shut up. And the rock clacks would clack a few times and then stop for a few minutes, then start clacking again. And it kept this up for a half an hour. And it wasn't very far from our camp. And I'm finally telling my girlfriend, you know, I got to see what's going on. And I waited for it to start clacking so that the noise of the clacking would, cover up the sound of me unzipping the tents. So I waited for it to start clacking again, and I started unzipping the tent. As soon as the zipper made a noise, the rock clack stopped. I got out and I went up over this little hill, and nothing, of course, nothing. And then when the sun come up, I didn't find any footprints or anything. But what was crazy, you know, that went on for a half an hour before I finally went out to check it out. You know, the night before the vocalizations, and then that morning the rock clacks. So I've experienced the rock clacking thing, not saying it was Bigfoot, but it's really suspect in an area where people are saying they're seeing them. And I get those finding Bigfoot style vocalizations the night before. It was a pretty cool experience. So I know what the rock clacks are about, and it's unmistakable. I mean, you know what rock on rock sounds like.
I asked a friend of mine who's a wildlife veterinarian. I asked her, are there any animals that can make a rock clacking sound in the wild? She told me, you know, monkeys, chimpanzees, that kind of stuff, they use tools. I said, okay, how about any animals in Idaho? She's like, none that I'm aware of.
Well, I did my research, and there is one, yellow-bellied marmoset will sometimes, for unknown reason, will sometimes take a small rock in both its hands and pound it up against a larger rock. And studying them further, yellow-bellied marmosets like to stay at around 5,000 feet elevation, maybe as high as 7, but that's pretty rare. And after I did the research, the area I was in was much too high for the marmosets. And I've camped there several times, and marmosets aren't secretive animals. If they're in the area, you know they're there, and I've never seen a marmoset in the area. And by the way, I went up close to where you had your sighting, and your sighting is way above marmoset, and I've never seen a marmoset in the area, so I don't think it was a marmoset making its way through the woods. And a marmoset ain't gonna carry 2 rocks and clack them together. They take one and they'll clack it up against a boulder or something like that.
Yeah, no, this thing worked its way around me, and it's an overwhelming feeling to know there's something out there that doesn't fit in the reference. I've often, since this time, I've wanted to talk to, I don't know, anyone who was smarter than me about the woods, you know, someone who has a PhD in whatever that's out there, because I don't know. I still don't sleep sometimes I keep trying to think of what could I have misidentified. That's what I go to, because I just have a hard time believing what my eyes saw.
Right.
So I go through denial. I went through, had to have been a misidentification, had to have been a grizzly bear. But then when I replay it over and over again, I see the shoulders and the arm and the hand. Okay, it's not a grizzly bear. Take that one off the list.
Right.
Is it a cinnamon black bear? Nope. You know, and you go through, and the only conclusion that I can come up with is it's a human. It has to be a human. And like I said, it's a double-edged sword. Maybe I'm lucky that I've seen something that other people haven't seen, but it's also a curse, because you you can't sleep when you don't have an answer.
I agree. It's modern day mystery. It's one of the reasons why I enjoy chasing it. There isn't very many modern day mysteries on the planet, so it's really intriguing. And if they are related to humans, I mean, how? I mean, are they part of the evolution? Did they split off long ago? How close are they related to us? I mean, in my opinion, a chimpanzee's, they say is like 99%, has 99% the same DNA as a person, and they look nothing like us. And now you got something out there that looks much more like us than a chimpanzee. How much DNA does it share of ours, if any?
Since this is really your world and you've been doing this a while, does anyone have any unexplained DNA on anything that do you know that? Does anyone ever, do they have DNA on this thing?
Dr. Sykes has been doing a lot of DNA study, but the DNA he's been getting a hold of is bear. And then you also have to take into consideration if someone actually has Bigfoot DNA and they test that, how are they going to how is a scientist going to come out and say, I have Bigfoot DNA, when you don't have an actual specimen that's a Bigfoot to compare it to? So there may be DNA out there floating around, maybe in some laboratories that may very well be Bigfoot, but because you do not have a control sample that is without a doubt Bigfoot, you can't make that claim. It's like in 2011, we collected some hair, some large wads of hair next to some footprints, some Bigfoot footprints. So, there's a very good chance that these look like they were, large tufts of hair. It looks like it was a very violent way that they lost hair. Maybe a couple of them fighting, maybe a breeding thing. Who knows? Maybe it didn't even come from Bigfoot at all. But one of our team members was going to Weber State at the time, and he took the hair in that we collected, and they started matching it up with North America mammals and started, and after a couple of weeks, they couldn't match it up with anything. So we reached out to a bunch of experts and sent that to the experts. They're in 4 different laboratories right now. And one of the experts, 2 years ago, he'd had the hair for like 3 years. And I was able to talk to him face to face. And he's, was telling me, what it's consistent with, what it isn't. And I know a lot more about hair than I should. It reminded me a lot of horse mane. I grew up on a horse racing farm, but it was the wrong width for horse mane. It was much too coarse, much too thick for human hair. It was right in the middle. You got your horse's hair that's about 300 microns wide. This was like 180 to 200, while humans 90. Well, anyway, this expert, this PhD that I spoke to about the hair, he says, it may very well be Bigfoot hair, maybe not, probably not, but we haven't been able to match it up with anything, and nobody's going to say it's Bigfoot because we don't have a controlled Bigfoot to say, yes, you have Bigfoot hair. So until there's a specimen, maybe one day if a dead or living body is harvested, someone will be able to say, yes, you definitely have Bigfoot hair, or no, because there's something to compare it to. So in my opinion, DNA is the same way. They may have the DNA, but without a control, there's no way to say that that's where it came from. So
why do you think we haven't found a body yet?
My opinion on why there hasn't been a body yet is, for one, I believe these creatures take care of their dead. And in my experience, when I'm out Bigfooting, and when there's a rare circumstance where I actually get to find a set of footprints, we usually find another set or two that are different size. And I used to have this stereotype that it was a rare, elusive, lone creature. And after several years of seriously hunting for the creature, I've come to realize that they're in pairs or small family groups or pods or whatever you call them. And I believe that they take care of their dead, and then they're really rare. I mean, I think in my entire life, I've only ever found black bear bones out in the woods. And then it was just like a skull and a couple of bones. The body had already been disseminated and everything. Well, in the state that I live in, there's about 5,000. They estimate there's about 5,000 black bear in northern Utah, and so you would think that I would find black bear bodies or bones and stuff all the time. No, in my entire life, one time, and it was just a couple of bone fragments. Now you take Bigfoot, for instance, and let's liberally say there is 150 Bigfoot in northern Utah, and I don't know. There may or may not be, but I know they've got to be really rare. Saw a lot more, even though they do whatever they can to remain unseen. But now they're that rare. And say, for instance, they live as long as, say, a mountain gorilla or a grizzly bear. So these creatures live to about 40 years. So maybe once every 40 years you have one die in such a small population. So it's very rare that you're going to have a dead body out there, and then if they're taking care of their dead, they take them off to a remote cave or a remote location and take care of the body. It's even going to be harder to come across these bodies.
And that's why I think it's got to be a subspecies of human, because a human would have the intelligence to have some sort of ceremony or whatever for death.
Right.
Even a Neanderthal, which was not supposed to be that smart, of the humanoid family, but just an animal, just if it was just an ape or if it was whatever, I just don't think that an animal would have the same conceptual ability to get rid of its dead that a human or a subspecies of human would.
Right, and I agree with you that the intelligence of the creature, the way it seems to communicate, I believe that the rock clacks, the Yoops, the wood knocks, I believe that their communication, and so the creature's gone beyond communicating with each other with just vocalizations, and that shows a higher level of intelligence, in my opinion. And then it knows it needs to avoid mankind, or it's going to get hurt. I mean, they realize that out of any creature out there, we can bring the hurt down on them. I'm sure many have been shot in the past. There's over 170 Bigfoot sighting reports out there where people say they've actually shot the creature. So they know that we can put the hurt on them from a distance. That's pretty intelligent, that they can communicate with each other to avoid us.
In the last 18 months since the sighting that I had, it's really triggered my interest in trying to figure this thing out. So reading or watching things and looking at, I always go back to the history of different things, the history of an area, the history of animals, and one thing that I was reading, or several things I was reading, was about the relationship that the Native Americans had with whatever this thing is, right? Do you look at these Native American tribes had a bunch of different names for them. And there's tribes, the Southern Paiutes. The Southern Paiutes that were in southern Idaho and Nevada, there was a report that they blocked up a cave that had a bunch of these large creatures in it and burned them inside the cave. Now, if that is the case, and this thing is a species of human. And let's say for the last 150 years, it had been in, like with other Native American tribes or First Nation tribes of Canada, territorial disputes. And there's no denying that the Native Americans and the First Nations people of Canada recognize this as another real creature, right? And all these things that I've been seeing and reading about, they understand that this is a real live animal, just like a wolf, just like a bear, just like an eagle. Well, if they've had territorial disputes and tribes have been in battles with these things, that would give us the historical perspective that this thing would avoid a battle with another human. But we haven't had, Native Americans haven't lived wild for over 100 years. If there have been hunters, and evidently there's been reports in the 20s and 30s where hunters have killed this thing or chased it off or shot at it or whatever, this thing would have learned to avoid humans, because all animals live in a stimulus response world. They respond to the stimulus in their environment. And if the stimulus is bringing down loud thunder and a lot of pain, they're going to avoid it, right? No different than you watch elk or you watch wolves or you watch bear. There's a reason we have to put on scent blocker and we have to do all these things to try to outsmart an animal in its own environment. And it just gets my mind racing on, how can I say it? It's a puzzle that I can't figure out, and it just driving me batty.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you there. It's been driving me batty for many years, and I enjoy the chase of the modern day mystery, and I really appreciate people like you telling us about your experience. It's just another piece of the puzzle, and it also gives us a history of the area. The guy that you were talking about, that maybe a year before your sighting, he saw the same thing about 7 years ago, and then you saw yours. If it was just an isolated incident, people would be saying, oh, well, it's just mistaken identity. But as these corroborating pieces of evidence start to stack up, you've got to take a step back and say, it's not mistaken identity. Several people in the same area are seeing the same thing, and an isolated incident. Oh yeah, sure, but we're getting a history of it, and it's just like you said, it's not just modern day hunters. This has been going on for hundreds of years. It's in the folklore of the Native Americans, and there's a lot of Native Americans today that, as a matter of fact, in the Bitterroot Forest area, they saw me do a Bigfoot expedition out there. That's not too far north from where you're at in reality, where you saw your Bigfoot. So there's something to it.
I've often wondered if I should go under hypnosis so I can get a better description. There's a part of me that, it's one thing to be on YouTube and
right,
actually sit down with a doctor and say, okay, hypnotize me. I want some answers on what the hell this thing was. And I may do that. I know that once you had Les Stroud on your show.
Right.
And he's had 2 situations he couldn't explain, it sounds like.
That's what got him interested in the subject is, he did have 2 situations that he could not explain. And as a matter of fact, when he was on his expedition with me, he found a really nice Bigfoot track in the gravel right near a water source. And we discussed casting it. And I told him, I was like, well, if there's one, there's probably more. Let's wait till we find a better one in a better situation to cast. And then it snowed that night, and we missed the opportunity to make a cast. I still look back on that situation. I'm like, oh man. So I was pretty excited that the area I took him into, he actually got to see at least a really nice footprint that was probably made a day or two before. So he's out there trying to find some answers for his experiences, and there's a lot of people taking him to some good places. So I'm sure he's probably going to get the experience that he's looking for.
He must be like me. I don't want to admit, or I don't want to say it was Bigfoot. It was an animal that I cannot identify. And it moved with the fluidity of a human.
Well, I appreciate you coming on the podcast. Sorry I muffed up your story a little bit when I did
That's all right.
the sighting report. I take the report and I give what I have in front of me, and I misinterpret things just like anyone. And I think I got pretty close to what it was, but it was really nice hearing from you. And we'll keep you anonymous. Hopefully the people that you don't want to recognize you don't.
They're going to recognize me. Someone's going to call me. I can already hear that. And what the worst part of it is I watch some of these shows and I watch some of these YouTube videos, and some of these people are serious nut jobs. I mean, they believe everything is a Bigfoot. This broken tree branch is a Bigfoot. This call is a Bigfoot. This sound is a Bigfoot. And I'm like, man, I could write that off from any animal that could come through and do that.
Yeah,
I want to have definitive answer.
I've told people many times, something can be suspect Bigfoot, but unless you saw that Bigfoot building that structure, or you saw that Bigfoot making that whoop, you can't say it was Bigfoot. What I particularly like about your situation is, you fall asleep and you hear the you that wakes you up. And, maybe it wasn't the creature that you saw making those youps, but there's a pretty strong case that it was that creature. I think it was Bigfoot. And then the rock clacking, you didn't see it make the rock clacking, but you just saw the creature. So you can make a good case of the rock clacking. I did investigate a sighting report in Colorado where the guy come right up on the Bigfoot clacking rock. He heard rock clacks, clack, 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 and he slipped up over a hillside and looked down on a creek, and there was a Bigfoot squatted down clacking rocks together, looked back at him, saw him, dropped the rocks, and took off. And from what I understand, the guy still has the rocks. He collected the rocks that the Bigfoot had dropped, and the Bigfoot was cracking him hard because the rocks were damaged. So unless you saw a Bigfoot doing it, you can't make claim that it was a Bigfoot. And I really think that you saw a Bigfoot making a vocalization that day.
Yeah, knowing how I felt, I can't imagine that somebody would go down and pick up those rocks. I mean, had I had the opportunity to haul ass out of there, I would have been gone. Like I said, it was a paralysis feeling of intensity that I do not want to experience again. And it was so when I hear these stories of, oh yeah, I saw this creature and I went down and picked up, I'm thinking I'm calling bullshit because I was scared to death. And
that's amazing that you had to sit there for 2 hours after you had that sighting.
Mm-hmm. And it was the longest 2 hours of my life. And if you ever get a chance to sit down with my hunting partners, they'll tell you they came and picked me up at lunch. We met back. So they came and got me, helped me out of the tree stand, got on our four-wheelers, pulled back to a couple miles back to an area where we had lunch. And we had lunch, we made our sandwiches, and I told them I'm heading back to the cabin. They said, you don't want to finish hunting? Nope.
I'm done.
I got on my four-wheeler and I hauled ass 27 miles down the road and then back to the cabin, and I never went back up there. There was no way in hell I was going back up there by myself. So these people that, I was 10 feet from it and I wasn't scared at all. Baloney. You must have been able to see something that you knew what it was, and it fit your frame of reference. Because for me, I still cannot tell you what it was. It does not fit any frame of reference of anything I've ever experienced in my life. I guess would be like someone who sees an alien or someone who bumps into a lion for the very first time in Africa. That's what it felt like. If I felt like I was prey, and I do not want to experience that again.
All right. Well, I think I'm going to wrap this up. I appreciate you coming on here and telling us your story firsthand.
Well, thanks for having me, Kelly.
Just gave me the chills hearing about it, and I'm sure I'll be going through that area again. I spend a couple of expeditions every year. I try to make it to the river and no return wilderness area, at least the outskirts of it, and so maybe one of these days we can hook up and go up and check out the tree stand area. I know I didn't make it quite all the way in. I got pretty close.
Yeah.
All right. Cool.
I'll take it. You just let me know. I'll take you up there. I'll put you in that tree stand. It's still up. It's right there.
Awesome.
You can sit there all night, man. Do a night investigation. I won't be there with you.
All right. Okay.
All right,
well,
for having me, Kelly.
All right. It was really nice talking to you, Jay.
Nice talking to you too.
All right. Well, have a good night. We're going to keep on squatching. So you viewers keep on watching. We'll keep on bringing you Bigfoot sighting locations. You get to watch our search for Bigfoot. And when we can get people like Jay to come on and talk about their experiences, we'll bring those to you too. You guys have a good evening.
All right.